You call this a weapon? I've seen children on my planet wield sticks with more sophistication. Commander Jace Callum clenched his jaw, suppressing the urge to lash out at the trio of alien sisters perched smugly in their ornate, floating thrones. Their crystalline, luminescent skin shimmered under the harsh lights of the grand chamber, each of them radiating an air of superiority that had grated on Jace's nerves since the moment they'd arrived. Perhaps the humans simply lack the intellect to grasp advanced technology, Lysara, the eldest and most vocal of the sisters, said with a mocking tilt of her head. Her voice was like a melody laced with venom, smooth yet cutting. It's not your fault, Commander. Evolution can only take you so far. The chamber, filled with representatives from the Intergalactic Alliance, buzzed with suppressed laughter and whispers. Jace's face burned, but he stood tall, his uniform crisp, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the sisters. You seem to forget, Jace said evenly, his voice carrying over the murmurs, that it was my primitive species that stopped the Krex invasion while your people were still debating trade agreements. The room fell silent. For a moment, the smug smirk on Lysara's face faltered, but it was quickly replaced by a glint of defiance in her opalescent eyes. Beside her, the other two sisters, Arivia and Celine, exchanged amused glances, as though they found the entire exchange beneath them. "Oh, we're aware of your contributions," Arivia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "But brute strength and blind luck aren't exactly qualities to be proud of, are they?" "Luck had nothing to do with it," Jace replied, his tone sharp. "Discipline, strategy, and sacrifice. Things your people might not understand from the comfort of your glass palaces." The tension in the room was palpable now. Jace knew he was treading dangerous ground. The Zyrian sisters weren't just any alien dignitaries. They were royalty, the daughters of King Vaelzer of Zirion Prime, one of the most powerful planets in the Alliance. Insulting them was as good as signing a death warrant for his career. Or worse. But he couldn't stand their condescension, not when his people had bled and fought to protect the Alliance. An alliance that included the Zyrians. Before another cutting remark could leave Lysara's lips, a deep, resonant voice filled the chamber, silencing everyone. Enough. King Vaelzer's presence was commanding, even from the massive holographic projection that loomed over the room. His crystalline form shimmered with an ethereal glow, and his piercing, multifaceted eyes scanned the room with an intensity that made even the bravest souls shrink back. "Father," Lysara began, her tone instantly softening, "we were merely mocking the very people who saved this alliance." Vaelzer's voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "I've tolerated your arrogance long enough. Perhaps it is time you learned the value of humility." The sisters' expressions shifted from smug to uneasy. Even Lysara, for all her bravado, seemed to shrink under her father's gaze. Jace, meanwhile, stood rooted to the spot, unsure of what to expect next. "Commander Callum," the king said, turning his attention to Jace, "you have shown great courage and restraint in the face of disrespect. For that, I commend you." "Thank you, Your Majesty," Jace said, inclining his head. He couldn't tell if the king's words were meant to soothe him or to prepare him for something far worse. "To ensure that my daughters learn the value of unity and respect," Vaelzer continued, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to settle over the entire chamber, "I hereby decree that they shall be bound to you in marriage." The chamber erupted into chaos. Gasps, shouts, and murmurs filled the air as everyone tried to process the king's words. Jace's mind reeled, his composure cracking for the first time. "Your Majesty, with all due respect," he began, his voice rising above the din, "this is highly unorthodox." "Indeed it is," Vaelzer said, his tone unyielding. "But it is also necessary. My daughters have spent their lives surrounded by comfort and adoration, unchallenged in their views. You, Commander, are a man of integrity and strength. If anyone can teach them the virtues of humility, it is you." The sisters stared at their father in open shock. "Father, you cannot be serious," Lysara exclaimed, her voice tinged with both outrage and disbelief. "I am entirely serious," Vaelzer replied. "You mock humanity, yet you know nothing of their strength, their struggles, or their resilience. Perhaps this arrangement will open your eyes. Jace felt a wave of panic rising in his chest. Your Majesty, I am honored by your faith in me, but it is decided, Vaelzer said, cutting him off. The bonding ceremony will take place immediately. Before Jace could protest further, the king's hologram disappeared, leaving a stunned silence in its wake. The sisters looked as though they had been struck by lightning, their confidence shattered. Jace, meanwhile, stood frozen, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. The bonding ceremony was a whirlwind. Alien traditions and rituals blurred together as Jace found himself standing alongside the three sisters in a chamber adorned with shimmering crystals and otherworldly flora. The weight of the moment pressed heavily on him, but he resolved to face it with the same determination that had carried him through countless battles. The sisters, for their part, looked anything but pleased. Lysara's jaw was set in a tight line, her pride clearly wounded. Arivia avoided eye contact altogether, her expression a mix of embarrassment and defiance. Celine, the youngest, appeared more curious than angry, her gaze flicking to Jace every so often as though trying to gauge his character. As the final words of the ceremony were spoken, a strange, glowing band appeared on each of their wrists, a physical manifestation of the bond they now shared. The room erupted into applause, but Jace barely heard it. His mind was a storm of emotions: disbelief, frustration, and a nagging sense of curiosity about what the future might hold. When the ceremony ended, the four of them were escorted to a private chamber to get acquainted, as one of the Zyrian officials had put it. The tension in the room was suffocating as they stood in awkward silence, avoiding each other's gaze. Finally, Jace broke the silence. "Well," he said, his tone dry, "this should be interesting." Lysara shot him a glare that could have melted steel. "Don't think for a moment that this means we accept you." "Trust me," Jace replied. "The feeling is mutual." And so began the unlikely and tumultuous union of a human commander and three alien princesses. A union that would test their patience, challenge their beliefs, and, perhaps, change the fate of the galaxy forever. The days that followed were anything but smooth. Jace's attempts to establish even a basic rapport with the sisters were met with resistance. Lysara remained aloof, her icy demeanor making it clear that she considered their union a punishment. Arivia's sarcasm was sharper than ever, and she took every opportunity to remind Jace of his inferior status. Celine, though less openly hostile, seemed hesitant to trust him, her curiosity tempered by her loyalty to her sisters. "This isn't going to work," Jace muttered one evening as he stared out at the sprawling cityscape of Zyrian Prime from their shared quarters. The view was breathtaking, but he barely noticed it, his mind consumed by the challenges ahead. "You're right," Lysara said coolly, entering the room with her usual regal grace. "It won't work." "Then why don't we try to make it work?" Jace asked, turning to face her. "We don't have to like each other, but we're stuck in this together." Lysara's expression softened slightly, but only for a moment. "I don't trust you, Commander. And trust isn't something that can be forced." "Fair enough," Jace replied. "But maybe we can start with something simpler. Like respect." She didn't respond immediately, her gaze distant as she considered his words. Finally, she nodded, a small, reluctant gesture that felt like a minor victory. Meanwhile, Arivia's relationship with Jace took an unexpected turn when a security breach forced them to work together. An unidentified ship had entered Zyrian's orbit, and Jace's military instincts kicked in as he coordinated efforts to intercept it. Arivia, though initially skeptical, couldn't deny his tactical expertise as he quickly devised a plan to neutralize the threat without causing unnecessary damage. "Maybe you're not completely useless," she admitted grudgingly after the crisis was resolved. "High praise coming from you," Jace replied with a faint smile. Celine, on the other hand, began to open up to Jace during their shared training sessions. She had a keen interest in human culture and asked countless questions about Earth's history, art, and traditions. Her genuine curiosity was a stark contrast to her sister's skepticism, and Jace found himself enjoying their conversations. As weeks turned into months, the icy barriers between them began to thaw. Lysara's respect for Jace grew as she witnessed his unwavering dedication to his duties and his refusal to be intimidated by their differences. Arivia, though still sarcastic, began to appreciate his resilience and resourcefulness. And Celine's initial curiosity blossomed into genuine admiration. But their journey was far from over. The galaxy was rife with tensions, and their unlikely union became a symbol of hope for some and a target for others. Threats emerged from all sides, forcing them to confront not only external enemies, but also their own insecurities and prejudices. In the end, it wasn't just their survival that was at stake. It was the fate of the Alliance itself. Together, they would face trials that would test the very limits of their strength, courage, and unity. And in doing so, they would discover that even the most unlikely bonds could become unbreakable.